Hello and welcome to the Wildcard Rewind. My name's Hannah and I'll be your host for the evening. Unfortunately, this week I don't have a fun NFL related rhyme. I actually think what Lewis did was just a little bit of a crime, but time to move on. We're almost through with week 10, so let's talk about it. Should we get started then?
I just wanna rewind to when we were young at heart. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
I felt the pressure this week, Paul, that I had to come up with a fun rhyme. So I was driving back from visiting my family this morning. I was like, right, what kind of rhyme can I do? And that's all I could come up with, a few lines. But I think I did all right.
Oh, you nailed it. You nailed it. And the best thing is you didn't put it in the show sheet or anything, so it just completely caught me off guard. And I was like, I love it. I absolutely love it. But it's my turn to host next week. So I may be ill next Monday. just say it. I may be ill if I don't come up with anything.
This is the problem now, isn't it? Lewis has set a precedent that we're going to start to feel like we have to follow. But if you break it, Paul, then that'll just save us job moving forward, won't it?
Yeah, or we try and outdo him.
Oh, now that's quite difficult. He's quite a good rhymey person, and I couldn't think of any good words because I was like, well, what happened this week? And nothing I could find rhymed. But maybe I just need a bit more time to think about it.
Yeah, maybe. But how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. We had a pretty awesome week 10, didn't we? I thought there was quite a few fun games. Unfortunately, the Bengals were on the losing side of one of them, but plenty to watch. Lots of kind of, I suppose, shootouts, really, weren't there? And probably more than we expected, I think. What did you think of this week? Did you have a good week?
Oh, the Cardinals won. Kyler Murray's back. The Cardinals won. I'm not saying it was a good win. Okay, it was a scrappy win, but a win's a win. We got it. We got a W, and I just had a. It was like a great evening. I just feel like every game that we were watching, there was some excitement to it. You know, nothing is like that Chargers game. In that for me was an incredible game, but apart from that one standing out, I think all were relatively good games, and I had a good fantasy week as well, to be fair. And I think I may be the highest scoring team in the JTT Cup again. You know,
So you're finally getting going
after
we not last the first season that it.
Yeah. I was dead last. And I'm happy to admit that I had a shower of shit team that just got injured, but I'm flying now. It does help when you've got Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, you know, all of these players that went nuclear this week. They're all in my team, so I've just looking forward to seeing how far up the leaderboard I've gone. You know,
are you in the playoffs at the moment, or are you trying to scrap yourself in now?
No, I think it was the highest scorer 2 weeks ago as well, and that pushed me into the playoffs. And then I had another good week, and that sort of solidified my position in the playoffs. And I think this one now is going to push me right up into. It's going to be quite hard for me to fall out, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I find with these best ball type leagues, you know, I think teams can start to kind of come through at this time of the season. You know, players that have kind of been bubbling, not doing a lot, but finally get going, you know, often can elevate teams into playoffs. And these that have been kind of cruising along, doing really well, can actually all of a sudden start to kind of bomb down and out.
Yeah. The other one that is my Scott Fishbowl team. I literally had the worst start ever to Scott Fishbowl, and my team somehow have decided they want to show up, but it's too little, too late, because it's 13 wins gets you through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm like putting plenty of points on the board, and I checked last time, and I'm actually like basically borderline reaching into the top 2,000. Now I know. Is it 1,600 people go through to the next round?
I think it's
So,
that, yeah.
you know, I'm looking at it thinking, can I sneak in? Yeah, I don't know if I've got the ability to sneak in, but it's, you know, my team has just decided now, it's gone, oh, we're probably not going to make the playoffs. Let's all show up and do what we were drafted to do, you know?
It's typical, isn't it? It really is typical. Before we start chatting a bit further, bye weeks this week coming up. Falcons, Colts, Patriots and Saints. I mean, I think last week was probably a lot worse for us from a fantasy perspective. I don't think there's too many people that would be really, really upset to miss this week. So it's not the worst bye week kind of problems. But I know there's some more bye apocalypse weeks coming up in the next couple of weeks. So got to keep our eyes on that. In terms of big news, I actually can't think of any major fantasy relevant injuries this week. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul. Anything that pops up with you?
No,
The odd
nothing.
concussion and things like that, you know, Derek Carr, etc. But he's obviously going to be on a bye. So by the time, you know, he might be back by then. Other than that, Taylor Heineke, hamstring, might have Ridder back. But again, they're on a bye. So we'll have to see for the next couple of weeks.
Hopefully not. Hopefully we don't ever see Desmond Ridder again.
Well, either way, neither of them are that fabulous, are they, to be honest? So
no, it's but I think Heineke's the better of a bad bunch.
Yeah, although he's not really made anyone more fantasy relevant, has he? And while we were talking about that, because we didn't have too many fantasy relevant injuries this week, I thought, let's just have a look and see who's had some notable performances this week, see if we want to chat about those. So sticking with the Falcons, Bijan had his first top 12 games since week 4. He actually started the season pretty strong. He was top 12 in first kind of 3 to 4 games, and then he's dropped off. Obviously, the fantasy community has been very upset with Arthur Smith's use of all of his talented players this season. So what do you think of Bijan's performance this week, Paul? And do you think that finally Bijan is going to start getting used as we expected and hoped he would? And do you feel confident now that you could plug him in as a running back one, or are you still a bit kind of unsure?
Yeah, the difficult thing for me is the Falcons win when they don't really use Bijan, and then they finally use him and he has over 100 rushing yards and a touchdown and everything like this, and then they lose, and then you're like, it's you know, Arthur Smith's going to be like, well, I used him and we didn't win or something like that, you know, and because he's a prick. But no, it definitely gave me a lot of confidence in him, because we know the ability's there and we know the talent's there. We know he's a phenomenal player. He's just not being used much in that run game, and they're bringing in other people and stuff like that, you know. So to me, it does give me more confidence, because he completely outsnapped them as well, didn't he? He had more attempts. He had everything was just. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the stats up now, just to. Where are they? The Falcons there. So he had 22 rushing attempts, where Algier had 9, and we've seen Algier out snapping him and stuff like this. And he had 4.3 yards per carry. He had 95 rushing yards. Sorry, I thought it was over 100 rushing yards, but he's obviously they trusted him with the ball for once, and to me, he was like, look, if you're going to give me the ball, I'm going to make it happen. And that's what you get with your elite running back, you know. So hopefully it has given me a bit more confidence to start him in a running back spot, and it has given me a lot of a glimpse into the future of what, if he's used properly, he can be. So it was nice to see.
What do you think about Arthur Smith? I know a lot of people are now kind of calling for his head. But what do you think that the Falcons think of Smith? Do you think that they're going to be upset and want to get rid, or do you think actually they're quite comfortable and he'll probably be here at least another season?
So that's really difficult. So because they're actually a team that are, where are they in their division? So they're 3rd in their division at the moment on 4-6. Obviously, the Bucks have had their bye week and stuff like that, and the Bucks. I think the Bucks play the Chiefs. Is it no, the 49ers this week. So if they lose, then you could see them swapping. So they've actually still within a chance of qualifying for the playoffs. Now, I don't like Arthur Smith. I don't think he's the best head coach there, to be honest. But somehow he still seems to be in a position where he could qualify for the playoffs. Now, if he makes the playoffs, I think the Falcons roll with him and go, he's got us to the playoffs. He's on what he's doing is obviously working, but what we have to do as fantasy managers is we have to understand that the way that they play NFL is different to the way that we play fantasy football. We want them to use this player so we can score more points, but actually Arthur Smith is, he's 4-6 on the season and 2-0 in the division, so he's winning games. What he's doing is somehow working to an extent, and he could make the playoffs, so let's get used to him if he makes the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they win that division, then he's going to stay. But I do wonder whether if they don't, just because there's been so much kind of
hopefully the media hype.
him.
Hopefully the media hype for everything and all these players and stuff like that. But you've got to look at it from a GM's point of view. As a GM, you've watched him draft Kyle Pitts, you've watched him draft Bijan. They've taken Drake London. They've taken all of these elite offensive players in the first rounds of these drafts, and yet somehow, if they're not making the playoffs, you sort of go, well, what more can we do for you? You look at somebody like the Chiefs who are not taking these elite offensive players and somehow still dominating. And I'm not trying to say he's Andy, he could do it like Andy Reid or anything like that. But, you're taking the best or generational talents and you're not doing anything with them. You're not using them.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued what they're going to do in the off-season about the quarterback position, because I think this is where they're going to have issues now, because if they do win that division, well, either way, they're going to be struggling, I think, to draft a quarterback this year. They can't ride. Well, I don't think they can ride with Ridder again. I think if he does, then he's certainly out next off-season or next season at some point. But where they're going to get their quarterback for? Are they going to go for someone like Kirk Cousins? He's going to be available, but he's just done his Achilles. Or, where they're going to look. Kyler's probably, may or may not be moving, but he might not if they win, then he's not going to move. So where are they going to find their quarterback from?
So I'm gonna make a shot in the dark and sort of say the same way that I thought this was going to happen with the Cardinals, and they were going to end up with the 101, and then they'd take Caleb Williams, and then the Falcons would come in and trade for Kyler. I think the same happens, but it's just a different team, and I think maybe they go after Justin Fields.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think they certainly could, because I think it's highly likely that the Bears are going to get the 101 now, aren't they, from the Panthers? How mad would you be if you're the Panthers owner right now?
Oh, man. And what was even worse is last week they played the Bears, so the Bears beat them to solidify the position of their first round pick, and it was like inception.
That's going to be really interesting, because then it's Frank Reich who's going to, is he going to survive the season? Things are not going well there. So
yeah, there's a lot of talk about him, isn't there?
I think there's going to be lots of interesting things going on at the end of this season. So the other thing I wanted to chat about was this Lions backfield. This is the first time we've seen Gibbs and Montgomery together, for a number of weeks. And it was in that interim, obviously, we saw Jahmyr Gibbs really kind of come into his own and take this backfield kind of by storm. So I was really interested to see how those two would work together. And ultimately, they actually both finished in the top 12 in PPR this week. So what are your thoughts on both of those now, Paul? Do you feel confident starting both of them on a weekly basis? Do you think one's ultimately going to take more of a role in this backfield, or do you think we can be comfortable with both of them going forward?
Do you know what? It's a real tough one for me, because I kind of feel that they used both because they were in a shootout. And I think if they were playing somebody like, I'm going to say the Patriots, who are not putting up many points in any games at the moment, I think if they were playing the Patriots, who weren't putting up many points, do you think you'd have seen them both utilised in the same sort of way? Do you think maybe the game script would have gone a bit different? So I'm still a bit nervous in a sense of, I think if they weren't in the shootout, they maybe would have planned it a bit different and maybe not split it sort of down the middle. I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs does win this role, and I do think it's his role now. And I think even though David Montgomery had more yards, he was obviously better with what he did with the ball. But I do think Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy going forward at the Lions. You know what? How old is David Montgomery now? He's I don't know. It doesn't say on you. It doesn't say.
I don't know. He must be
26. 26. Sorry, it does say 26. He's 26 now. So, you know, that's the age that we sort of go, oh, it's the running back sort of cliff, that 26. And Jahmyr Gibbs is the young, hot prospect in that team. And I just think it's Jahmyr Gibbs needed his opportunity. He took his opportunity. He's definitely solidified himself a role every week, whether it's a 50-50 or whether it's 60-40 or 70-30. I just think it's always going to be in favour of Jahmyr Gibbs. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think ultimately they want to use them both. I think this was an interesting week because actually it turned out that Montgomery was the more explosive one because he had that long touchdown run. And Gibbs kind of did more of the kind of short yardage. He was at the goal line. Like, it was totally kind of the opposite of what we were expecting. Now, I actually don't think that's going to be their roles going forward. I think it is going to be the other way around. But I do think they want them both involved. And I think actually, ultimately, you know, this offense is putting up a lot of numbers. You know, the defense is improved, but it's not that great. So I think they will be continuing to put up a lot of numbers. So I think I would be relatively confident starting them both. And I think ultimately they would both finish, I think, as a running back 2, you know, in any kind of week. You know, good weeks, they might both be a running back 1. Bad weeks, they might be running back 2s or, you know, just below kind of thing. But I still think that you can start them. Again, like you say, we've only seen one game with them back together. So I think on a game script that was a bit less shootout, we'll kind of get more of an idea exactly who's going to have what. But I ultimately think they will utilise them in a way that both of them gets enough to be fantasy relevant.
Yeah, the big factor for me as well is David Montgomery didn't actually have any receiving yards or targets, where Jahmyr Gibbs had 5 targets, 3 receptions, 35 yards. So if you're playing in a PPR league, that's always something, you know, you're talking three points straight away there from 3 receptions, and then your yards on top and your rushing things and your 2 touchdowns and stuff. So it seems like in fantasy, I think Jahmyr Gibbs' touches seem to be the valuable touches, whereas Montgomery kind of seems to be the workhorse as such, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, that, you know, these targets are always worth more. So I do think Gibbs ultimately is the one that you would prefer to own. But I think if you have either of them, you're probably going to be, you know, happy to start them both. Yeah.
Especially with how shit the running back sort of landfield is at the moment, or landscape, should I say, not landfield, like the landscape, but it just seems to be awful at the moment. And you know, Mags has brought this up on the Dynasty show. He's also brought it up on the Hot Seat show and stuff like that, about how bad the running backs are this year and how much they are scoring lower than other years and stuff like that. So I think if you can start both of them, start both of them.
Yeah, it is. It's terrible, isn't it? It's really interesting. Really interesting. The other guy I just wanted to quickly mention before we move on, Dak Prescott. He finished as so far the overall QB1 this week. Obviously, we've got a game to go, so that might change. But in fact, when I was looking at his stats, he actually has quietly finished in the top 3 in each of the last 4 games. So he's finished as a quarterback 1, 3, 2, and then 1 again this week. He was actually drafted as the quarterback 10 in the off season. But he's actually currently the quarterback 6, so far through the past 10 weeks. I'm just really interested, Paul, because I found it interesting in the off-season that everyone, actually nobody was talking about Dak. People kind of, apart from you, Paul, everybody seemed to be very off him and really not that bothered about him at all. But do you think that people were overlooking him and actually we're forgetting that he can be an elite fantasy quarterback?
So the only reason I say I was talking about it was because I remember putting out my Dynasty 2023 QB rankings online and got absolutely slaughtered online for, I've just brought them up in front of me here. So I put Trevor Lawrence as QB 12, and Dak Prescott as QB 7. And people were like, oh my God, why have you got Dak so high? He shouldn't be that high. Why have you got Trevor Lawrence so low? And everything like that. And I was like, well, when I was doing them, I was looking at them and I was like, I just feel like Dak is being slept on as such, And it's probably a bit higher than consensus on him. So I was actually, I have Dak in many, many leagues. He's one of my most owned QBs after Kyler Murray. Obviously. But my problem with Dak, so I love Dak, and I think he has sort of gone under the radar a little bit, and he's had some big games. I've got him and CD in the JTT Cup, which is why I've been top scorer twice in the last 3 weeks or something like that, So I do think people slept on him, but I do feel Dak Prescott at QB7 is probably his ceiling. And I think if you take him there, he's not going to finish much higher than that. And that's my worry with Dak. Whereas when you talk somebody like, I don't know, Joe Burrow, who seems like quite a similar sort of player, I think Joe Burrow has the ability to go out and finish a season as a QB1. Whereas I worry whether Dak could do that over a season. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, he can be very kind of he fluctuates, doesn't he?
Yes, very much so.
He's not very reliable. He can have a top 3 week and then he can have a top, a QB 2 week sometimes, can't he? And he can be a bit up and down. The thing that I found interesting about him this season actually is so far, just through 10 games, he has rushed for 135 yards. He's had 2 rushing touchdowns. Whereas last season, through the whole season, he actually rushed for just 46 yards and 1 touchdown. Doesn't seem right, does it?
No. Was that when he came back from his...
Oh, that's the postseason. Ignore me. Wait a minute. Hold up. Let me find him.
Because he came back from his broken ankle, didn't he? And he didn't
182 yards on the whole of the season with 1 touchdown. That's in the regular season. Whereas this season already, he's had 135 yards, and that's through 10 games. So he's clearly rushing a lot more. And like you said, he's had a number of injuries through the past kind of 3-4 years. So I think the reason he dropped out of that elite tier was because he just was not rushing anymore. And I do think if you're going to be an elite fantasy quarterback, you need to have that rushing. So I think that Joe Burrow, it's not easy for Joe Burrow to finish as the quarterback 1 because he doesn't rush enough. It's not part of his game. Yeah. You know what I mean? He does rush. He scrambles and he's been doing some running, but not very much.
I was using Burrow because I don't want to sit here and go, oh yeah, but Lamar Jackson can finish QB1 because he'll rush for 1,000 yards in a season. You know, the same as Justin Fields, the same as what I think Anthony Richardson would do. I was trying to find a player that was similar to the way I think Dak plays. You know, Joe Burrow is more about throwing the ball and he'll scramble if he has to. The Pat Mahomes, you know, he doesn't really do that much rushing, you know. He scrambles if he has to. And I think Dak is a player like that doesn't really do much rushing. He used to rush quite a lot. If you look at his early sort of years, he did do a lot of rushing of the ball. Whereas now I think it was ever since he broke his ankle, he's sort of been a bit, what's the word? A bit less on the rushing side of things. But I just think Dak, to me, is not somebody that I would be taking any higher than like QB sort of 7. That would be his absolute ceiling for me. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can certainly talk yourself into, 6 players before him. But I do think if he gets back, if he's doing as much rushing as he historically has done, he can be elite. And I think he's starting to rush more and he's becoming elite. And I think we basically were like, meh, he's done, he's not rushing anymore. He's not going to rush anymore. But actually, when he's shown the last 4 weeks that he can and will, and that's made him an elite, fantasy quarterback. So I'm interested to see, does this carry on? Yeah. I just kind of feel a bit like this Dallas offense is like click to switch the last few weeks and they're just on one. And I'm like, is this going to carry on or are they going to have dips again like we've seen with Dak Prescott, in the past? So I'm just really interested to see, because I think ultimately if he keeps up with this, he may well kind of vault himself back into kind of the lower end of the elite.
Yeah. 100%.
So I just wanted, before we moved on, I just really want to quickly, I did this, I think you were off on that day, Paul, but I did this about a quarter of the way through the season with Lewis. And what we did was that we looked back over kind of the preceding weeks and we had a look at who were the top players at each position up until this point. So, we're actually just over halfway through the regular season in the NFL, and we're kind of heading towards the playoffs in the fantasy season. So I was just really keen to have a look at, right, who are the top performers in each position through 10 weeks so far? And are these the guys that we expected it to be? Is there anyone we're surprised is not in there? And how have our expectations from the off-season changed based on these last 10 weeks? So let's just start with the quarterback position. So top 5 in order: Josh Allen, QB1, Jalen Hurts, QB2, Justin Herbert, QB3, Lamar, QB4, Sam Howell, QB5. Now, we've just been talking about rushing QBs. Now, 3 of those 5 would be what I would term rushing QBs: Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar. So really not surprised that they're in there. Then there's the 2 other guys. So to me, I wouldn't put Herbert as a rushing QB. I'd put him more in the Mahomes kind of side. And I just think him and Keenan Allen have had this pretty good connection for a lot of this season. I think that's kind of shown in both him and Keenan Allen's fantasy results. For me, Sam Howell's actually the surprise here. Now, when we did flag plants and unplants, Sam Howell was actually one of my unplants because I was convinced that he would play a few games and be benched, and that would be the end of that. We'd see Jacoby Brissett, and that would be the end. But he's hanging in there, and he's performing for fantasy.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say. He's currently QB5. Look at the names that are not on that list. Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, even Dak Prescott that we were just talking about. Trevor Lawrence, all of these names, anyone that was top 10 that you could put in there, and somehow we're going Sam Howell is QB5.
I know. I do think that some of that is that the Washington defense is terrible. And so, they're always in shootouts, always, because the Washington D just can't put it together. So he's just slinging the ball. Like they're not rushing the ball very much at all at the moment. He's just slinging it around all the time. And he's not scared to sling it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why he's doing that. And also, he does have legs. Like, he doesn't have many design rushes, but he will extend the plays, and he'll run and scramble. And so far, he's done that for 174 yards. So, again, he is running. I mean, he's nowhere near running like any of these other guys. So Lamar, 418 yards rushing already. Jalen Hurts, 316. Josh Allen, 233. So, they're all rushing a lot more than him. Interestingly, Patrick Mahomes, guess how many yards rushing he's got this season?
7.
258.
Oof. You know why? His O-line is shit, and he's got to get his little legs moving, isn't he?
And also his wide receivers are never open.
Yeah.
So it's just really, really interesting. The thing that I find really interesting about that is that, in this off-season, the top 3 QBs, so Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Patrick Mahomes, were all drafted in the first 2 rounds. And I'm like, was it worth spending your draft capital on these quarterbacks? Did they give you any kind of advantage over anybody else? And to me, the answer is no. So Josh Allen sitting at 210 fantasy points. Justin Herbert, who was drafted, where was he drafted? Round 6, probably a bit later.
Yeah. I was going to say he was like QB6, QB7 to some people, wasn't he?
185 points. So actually, what's the difference? 25 points. So it's giving you no advantage. So to me, that was a waste of a pick, I think, personally.
Yeah, but then, hindsight is this wonderful thing, isn't it? It's this wonderful thing, and we go, oh yeah, we could have done this. We work it out based on like gut stats, stuff like that. To me, is it a shock that Sam Howell is here in this top 5, or is it a bigger shock that Pat Mahomes isn't? What would you say is the bigger shock? Sam Howell being in the top 5 or Pat Mahomes not being in the top 5?
They're both a shock to me, to be honest. But I would say definitely Pat Mahomes is probably the biggest shock.
You know what I mean? People were taking him as their first QB. In Superflex Superflex like leagues, people were taking him, like debating him at 101, if not definitely at 101. Some of these charity leagues, people are like, obviously Scott Fishbowl's all about tight ends and no negative points and stuff. People would debate whether to take him or Kelsey as like 101 and stuff like this, and Josh Allen and everything like this, and it wouldn't have paid off.
No, absolutely not. But I do think people got swept up in last season where kind of Mahomes, Allen, Hurts all seemed to kind of separate themselves. So Mahomes finished as the QB1 last season. It was Mahomes, then Allen, then Hurts. So QB4 was Joe Burrow. He had 350 points on the season, whereas Pat Mahomes had 417 points. So that was like 60 odd points higher. So people got excited because they did separate themselves, a bit. But that was actually unusual. Typically, the QB position is relatively flat.
Yeah.
So I think people got overexcited about what happened last season and thought it was going to happen again this season, and it just hasn't. And I think sometimes we need to kind of lose our, goggles of recency bias, and we have to think, right, what are the longer term trends? And I think people, ultimately lost out because they got too excited about last season's points and they were chasing those versus actually having a look at this season and seeing, is it to my advantage to draft Patrick Mahomes in the second round?
Yeah, I agree.
Shall we have a quick look at the running back position? I think this is actually really interesting. So running back 1, this is all PPR scoring, by the way. So running back 1, CMC. I'm actually obviously not surprised at all. Running back 2, Raheem Mostert so far.
Shocked.
Running back 3, Travis Etienne.
Not shocked. Love that guy.
I'm not shocked based on what he's done this season, but based on my thoughts about him in the off season, I am.
Yeah.
Running back 4, which I'm actually really surprised about because he's been, to me, I thought he'd been really quiet this season, Josh Jacobs. Now, I think that might have come off the last couple of games where he's really started kind of propelling on, hasn't he? And he's got over 100 yards both of the last 2 games. And I think ultimately he's going to perform really well towards the end of the season because they're now featuring him with the new head coach. Running back 5, not shocked now that I've seen what he's doing on the team, but shocked based on what I thought in the off-season, Alvin Kamara. And he was suspended for 4 games.
I was going to say he missed the first 3 games because he had suspension, or the first 2 games. He came back. He was either back in week 3 or week 4. So the fact that he's done that and he's made it into the top 5 is phenomenal. Raheem Mostert, if you'd have asked me at the start of the season, put somebody in the top 5 halfway through the season, Raheem Mostert is not even somebody that I would have even considered. He's just shocked everyone. But that Miami's running back room has shocked everyone, hasn't it? If Achan hadn't have gone out with an injury and onto IR, he'd definitely be in this list as well. But the biggest shock to me in this list is Josh Jacobs, and I feel exactly the same as you with that one. I didn't feel like he was doing anything, and maybe he's done a bit of the Dak Prescott. He's kind of steadily just kept rolling, done what he needs to do, and then he's got to the point where he's had a couple of big games, and that's pushed him into the top 5. Running back 4 on the season so far after 10 weeks. That's you're quite happy with the value what you paid for Josh Jacobs there, really, aren't you? Yeah,
it's interesting actually because I'm just having a look at his PPR finishes over the season. He's actually only had 1, 2, 3, 4 top 12 finishes this season. He finished 3rd, 6th, 11th, and 3rd, and actually this week he's down as the running back 19 on the week. So he's actually not even done that well this week from a fantasy perspective. So I just think it's really interesting. And I think, like you say, I think this is all based on the running back landscape.
Yeah.
You actually don't have to do very much at all to get points. Yeah, running back 19, and be in it. So it's just really interesting. I was just having a look at half PPR because I was like, a lot of Alvin Kamara stuff, as we've seen, is dump offs, lots of receptions. So in half, it's the same. So CMC, Raheem, Travis. Then running back 4 is Brian Robinson, and running back 5 is Josh Jacobs. So Kamara drops down to running back 8.
My guy, Brian Robinson.
I know.
Shooting in there. You know what I mean? I'll keep blowing his trumpet.
He's actually 6th in PPR. Now, I found he did really well at the beginning of the season, and I feel like he's gone really quiet now.
Excuse me.
Actually, I know he's done very well this week, but up until
I was going to say, have a look at my mate this week who went for 38 rushing yards and 119 receiving yards and a touchdown. You know what I mean?
But look at this. So week 1, running back 15, week 2, running back 1. Then he's running back 34, 15, 29, 17, 27, 25, 18. Then he's number 1. So he went through this whole stretch in the middle where he wasn't any higher than a running back 2. And again, it's just because the running back landship
keep churning them points.
But it's because it's a crapshoot, isn't it? Because ultimately, if you were like this in any other year,
we're getting excited about somebody that was finishing as a mid running back 2, and just thinking, he's a top 6 running back this season.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I'm doing so well in all my leagues. I'm doing so well in a lot of my leagues because I've got so much Brian Robinson who's running back 6 on the season. It's just like, sure.
I know. Again, I think this, is an interesting one where, a lot of the people you drafted pretty high and, are not really doing what we thought that they were going to do, really.
Yeah.
But interesting one for us to discuss, I think, at the end of the season, just review. Now, we got so excited talking about the current quarterback and running back positions that I think we'll leave the wide receiver and the tight end positions for next week. Because again, these I think are quite interesting.
Yes,
just to chat through.
to be honest, without giving anything away, I think the wide receiver landscape is exactly how I'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
Or the players there, I'm quite like, yeah, I can see all of that. The tight end one shocks me.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, again, the wide receiver one's interesting because, like you say, I think ultimately the guys at the top are probably roughly who we expected. But there's certainly some in there that I expected to be there that aren't, and some that I didn't expect to be near there that are.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something for us to chat through next week rather than rushing this week.
week.
So let's move on to rewind the tape. Obviously, this is the one where we discuss something that we've learned from this week that's helped us as fantasy managers. How did I know you were going to say this, Paul? Go on. Here he goes.
Kyler is still elite. That's what I learned this week.
I do think I was well impressed with how much he ran and how well he ran. Really impressed.
Yeah, it shocked me, to be honest. Do you reckon I've actually put a serious answer? Do you reckon we've got time to do that serious answer, or should I save that serious answer for next week?
No, save it for next week, I think.
Okay, because I was going to say we've spoke so long about everything else.
Yeah, so, save it for next week because it's not a this week specific one, is it? So yeah, I think that would be a good one to chat through.
But what I've learned this week is Kyler Murray is still elite, and I don't care I don't want the 101 anymore. Sod Caleb Williams. Kyler Murray's the guy.
I want to see where's he finished this week. Let's have a look. Just wanted to see. 11.
See, he's a QB1 and he's just coming back off injury.
Well, to be fair to him, absolutely. You know, he is just coming back off injury. So
and Clayton Tune came in for a snap and rushed for a touchdown as well. He did more this week than what he did last week, and he started the whole game.
Yeah. Well, they found his new role on the team.
Oh, don't tell me he's going to be a Taysom Hill.
Yeah,
don't tell me he's going to be a Taysom Hill.
He's going to steal touchdowns from Kyler. Yeah. So
what did you learn this week?
So this week I was just kind of reflecting today, and I was like, this is the time of the season when random players pop up that ultimately are going to change, I think, the fantasy landscape going forward. And I think if you potentially have these players on your team, they may be out there and help you win a fantasy championship. And they have not even been on the radar the whole time. So the guys that made me think of this, there were 3 actually. Now, they may or may not do anything, but these are guys that I have my eye on, that if I have a spare bench spot, I'm putting them on because I think that these could be sneaky, waiver ads that actually end up meaning that you win your championship. The first guy is Keaton Mitchell.
Oh, I love it.
He only had 4 touches this week, but he was like super explosive, and he just has this spark, and you can just see it when he's running. He just elevates that Ravens offense, I think. And he actually finished as a running back 17 on 4 touches.
It was that first touchdown that he went for against the Browns. How he just took that one step, and then it was just like, oh, I've got space now. I'm going to open the burners, take it to the house, run past everyone. It was just like, man, you are rapid, mate. And if they use you the way that you can be used, you're going to be insane.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been the Underdog one, and they were just saying that he is like Devon Achane, but like Devon Achane light. So if they give him more opportunities and they utilize him well, I think he could easily be explosive and give, ultimately be extremely fantasy relevant moving forward. But we need them to utilize him properly and enough. So again, he's just one I'm keeping my eye on. I just don't know how they can't give him touches based on what he's done. The other guy is Ty Chandler. Now, again, I know they've not been that keen on utilizing him at the beginning of the season. But he came in this week. Obviously, Cam Akers, unfortunately, did have another injury last week, didn't he? And basically, unfortunately, his NFL career is likely to be over. So they had to use Ty Chandler. And I think he brought more explosiveness than Mattison, who went off with an injury. And he finished as a running back 24. So I think if they utilise him more, and I think he kind of suits Dobbs as well. So I think if they utilise him more and he kind of is complementary to Dobbs's rushing and his skill set, I think Ty Chandler could ultimately be fantasy relevant. And the other guy that I'm keeping my eye on, I'm not as convinced, but if there's an injury, he's definitely going to be one, and that's Rico Dowdle. This week, he played quite a lot, and he finished as a running back 16. I think he finished.
Where did Pollard finish?
I know, that's what I was going to say.
Pollard had an absolute trash week, didn't he?
He finished higher than Pollard, didn't he? Who finished as the running back 38.
Oh dear.
It's really interesting, isn't it? That this is another massive conversation that we should have at some point, because people were super excited. I mean, me included, that he was going to be the running back one on this team, and he's being unleashed. Unleash Pollard. He's going to be fantastic, and he's just not been able to live up to that.
Yeah.
So
I feel the same for Alexander Mattison though as well.
Oh yeah, but I never expected him to do much, because yes, when he did have to come in relief, the odd 1 or 2 games, he did play really well, but I just wasn't convinced that he would do that over a season. Like, it wasn't like Pollard, who, again and again, game in, game out, he was producing,
Yeah, it just I was just worried for Pollard. I was worried for Mattison, so.
Just trying. Oh, Pollard is the running back 18 on the season so far.
People had him really high.
Yeah,
Dynasty rankings, redraft rankings, the lot. People were all in on Pollard.
He's behind Gus Edwards, Pacheco, Zach Moss.
The legends of the game.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, just really interesting from that perspective. Right, should we talk about our fantasy studs of the week?
Let's do it.
And those under the radar poll players. I'm not sure you remember that. It's a shame we're not all here this week, because I was thinking we need to put down some ground rules for this about how we decide who is considered an under the radar player. I think that's one for us to discuss.
Is it? Have you got a problem with my under the radar player this week?
Well, when he finished as the wide receiver 1 the preceding week, I was like, I'm not sure that qualifies him as under the radar. I'm talking about your last week's choice. I haven't looked who you've got this week. Okay, this looks more acceptable, this week's one.
Does it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, I'm glad you allow me to have that one. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I will allow you to have this one, but you've got to think about it, Paul. Think about under the radar. Anyway, let's talk about last week's. So this was an interesting one, because Lewis and I both picked players from the same team, wide receivers. So I went for Josh Reynolds and he went for Jameson Williams. Well, ultimately, both of us flopped, because Josh Reynolds had 4 targets, 2 receptions for 15 yards and finished as the wide receiver 67. Jameson Williams had 2 targets, 2 receptions for 18 yards and finished as the wide receiver 64. So that was a complete disaster. And basically, I think we learned that nobody apart from Amon-Ra St. Brown of the wide receiver group is of any fantasy value. That was my lesson from these. Okay, Paul went for Tank Dell, who finished as the wide receiver 1 the week before. He had 6 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown, and he finished as a wide receiver 13. Well, actually, he deteriorated from the week before, didn't he?
Yeah, but can I just add? You're saying players under the radar, yeah? And you're saying, yeah, but he was the wide receiver 1 on that week. The 3 weeks before that, apart from his bye and the New Orleans Saints, where I believe he's in concussion protocol, he's finished 75, 47, and 84. That's his wide receiver finishes in the 3 games leading up to that wide receiver 1 thing. So come on, he's hardly setting the world alight.
Well,
I'm victory lapping this. Okay, I'm victory lapping it. Tank Dell.
Okay, you victory lap along with
I'm going
yourself.
to. I'm going to.
Okay, fine. I'll let you do whatever you want, Paul. I disagree with you, but that's fine. We're used to it.
Yeah, I'm not shocked.
Right, go on then. Tell me who you've got this week.
So
Is it
this
going to
week,
be under the radar?
this week, my under the radar player is Logan Thomas, the tight end for the Washington Commanders. And the reason I've gone for him is because now 4 games on the bounce, he's had at least 5 targets. Sam Howell obviously likes to use him as a bit of a safety blanket, and he's playing in a big divisional game against the Giants this week. And I think that, QB5 on the season needs a good tight end to help him out.
Yeah, I do quite like that. I do think Logan Thomas does have some kind of boom potential. Again, the Commanders are interesting offense, aren't they? Because they're doing a lot of spreading the ball out. So ultimately, it could be nobody gets anything, or
the thing with the tight end landscape, though, isn't it? He could get
just
4
need a
5
touchdown.
targets. If he gets one of them in the red zone and scores a touchdown, all of a sudden he's a relevant player and he finishes in the top 10. So
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, Lewis couldn't be with us, but he did send us his nomination. So for under the radar player, he's gone for Romeo Dubs this week. So that's an interesting one.
Love it.
I've gone for Rashee Rice this week. So having a look into it, the Eagles they're playing the Eagles, which I think is going to be a great fun matchup anyway. But they're allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers so far this season. And to me, Rice is the best wide receiver on that team. The Chiefs are coming off their bye, so I'm hoping that they're going to starting to get Rice more involved, and we're going to see this kind of post-bye rookie bump, and he's going to basically do awesome this week and be the under the radar player.
I'm all in on Rashee Rice. I love him.
Yeah, I just hope that they give him a bit more playing time and he comes through. So, should we talk about our scares of the week?
Yes, let's talk about our scares of the week, shall we?
So, actually, last week, I think we did pretty well, Paul, both you and I. So, I went for Davante Adams. He did okay. He had 6 receptions for 86 yards, but that actually only made him the wide receiver 20, which I think, to me, is underperforming for what we expect or where we drafted Davante Adams. You went for Jordan Addison, so you've gone from one extreme to the other with him. He had 4 receptions for 69 yards and finished as a wide receiver 32. So that's 2 not too bad calls this week, Paul. I don't know what's going on here. Unfortunately, he didn't do quite as well as us, didn't Lewis? Because he went for Rashad White and he actually did pretty well. He had 20 rushes for 56 yards, 2 receptions for 47 yards and a touchdown, and finished as a running back 10. So Go on, Paul. Tell me who you've got.
I've gone for Rashad White. So I've actually picked the right game to choose to be out on Rashad White. He's going up against the 49ers in week 11, and we've just seen the 49ers hold Travis Etienne, who we know is a top 5 running back on the season, to a 44-yard game. I think it was 35 rushing and 9 receiving yards, 0 touchdowns, and limited him to completely nothing. And I think they're going to do the same with Rashad White this week. And I just think it may be a bit of a tough day in the office for the Buccaneers this week.
Yeah, I can see that happening. The 49ers came out all guns blazing, didn't they, after their bye? So, yeah, I'm excited to see what they do. Lewis thinks that Stephon Diggs is going to have a scare next week, and I'm going to go for Jamar Chase. So the last time the Bengals played the Ravens, he had 5 receptions for 31 yards. This defense has caused the Bengals some struggles in the past. We're coming off a loss. We've got a short week, short turnaround, so I can just see them bottling him up again and the Bengals struggling. So that's my thoughts.
I wish Lewis was here to give us his reasoning behind Stephon Diggs. They're playing the Denver Broncos, so I would love to hear his theory. And you've done it again where you've gone, it's a win-win situation for me Because if I pick Jamar Chase and he has a bad game, then I look really good on the podcast. And if I pick Jamar Chase and he has an awesome game, then he's just had an awesome game against the Ravens. So it's a win-win situation for you, Hannah, isn't it? I know how you work.
I know. Well, you've got to get wins where you can, because I'm not doing too well with these at the moment. I've gone off the boil. Things aren't going well for me. So I need to get my wins where I can. Should we talk about our wild cards? Because last week you and I talked about the same game, didn't we? We were talking about the Jags and the Niners, and we were totally wrong. So you thought they were going to win, and they lost terribly, 34-3.
So
and I
bad.
said CMC was going to have fewer rushing yards than Etienne, and I was totally wrong as well, because he had 95 yards to Etienne's 35. Lewis, really annoyingly, and again, I'm upset that he's not here so that I can berate him for choosing this wild card, because he said that the Texans were going to beat the Bengals, and they blooming went and did it, didn't they? So I'm very upset about that.
I was cheering him on.
For a change, Paul, I was very pleased to hear that.
You weren't, because you know I'm normally wrong. So the fact that I cheered him on, they lost.
But you'd started to be right, so I thought maybe for once you were right.
Maybe. What's your wild card of the week then?
So mine is that CD Lamb is going to have more receiving yards than all of the Panthers receivers in that game. Now, Lewis actually commented on the same game, and he's saying slightly the opposite to me. So he's saying that the Panthers are going to beat the Cowboys.
Again, I'd love for him to be here to explain why he thinks the Panthers are garbage, like really, really garbage. Now, I know the Cowboys have had a couple of slips, but the Panthers are garbage. Like, at least the Cardinals could put together a few plays. The Panthers are garbage. Lewis, you're gonna have to text me, okay? This is a test. Lewis, you're gonna have to text me and explain this one.
Give me reasoning. We'll have to get him to explain next week.
Yeah, we will. Mine for this week is I think Miami will race ahead to a massive lead and bench Tua in the fourth quarter. They're playing the Las Vegas Raiders this week.
Oh, that's quite fun. Yeah.
And I think they'll be so far ahead that they'll bench Tua in the fourth.
Oh, I quite like that. I do like that one. I'm interested.
I did throw in the race ahead for any Formula One fans because it's the Formula One at Las Vegas this weekend. So I thought I'd race ahead, you know.
Oh, well done. I'm not a Formula One fan, so that totally passed me by.
Yeah,
but...
somebody somewhere would have got it, and then they would have heard me explain it and gone, "Oh, you've ruined it now."
Hopefully, someone will appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week, Paul. So, when Lewis is back next week, we'll have to get him to explain some of his crazy opinions. Knowing Lewis, they'll be right. So that's the annoying thing about it. We're like, these are random. Why has he picked those? I'm telling you now.
If the Panthers win, I'm not coming on next week.
Oh, well, might not see you then. No, yeah. I'd be very surprised. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on X. You know where we are, at Wildcard Rewind. And obviously, we're on YouTube too. Just search for the Fantasy Wildcard Podcast Network. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Paul, you're going to be the host, so I'm hoping to see some fun rhyme when we start the show. No pressure at all.